Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at MikeMmedia and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on YouTube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast to like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.
Welcome in, friends, to another episode of the Quarantine Files here on the Good Brothers on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, joined by the great, the awesome, sometimes just average, the good brother himself, Alex Mercado. What's going on, good brother?
Yee, what's up?
Not much, buddy. Hopefully you guys are doing well on your end, and hopefully everybody listening to the show is doing all right on this Sunday. And good brother, we have a really fun episode to get to today. What do you have on dock for all of us on this edition of the Quarantine Files?
So for this edition of the Quarantine Files, we're going to do part 1 of 2 of the Hanna-Barbera. Now, the difference with Hanna-Barbera, why we're doing a part 2 compared to the other episodes, is Hanna-Barbera commonly gets mixed in with the Cartoon Network era of the 90s and later, which they produced most of that also. So we decided we were going to do post-90s and pre-90s Hanna-Barbera to make it a little easier and a little more fun for everyone. So today we're going to start off with the originals, all the way up to about the 90s, and then the part 2, which we will release later this week, now that we know we're going to be in sight, so at least April 30th, will be the 90s and on.
Now, how influential was the Hanna-Barbera cartoons to pop culture today and to the medium in itself?
I mean, it has to be one of the biggest players when it comes to animation in general, right there with Walt Disney. It's created a lot of characters that maybe we don't go back and watch the cartoons necessarily, but the characters themselves kind of lived on in pop culture. And we're going to talk about a lot of those characters today that are still around, even though they're not in a cartoon, in a movie. Their character was strong enough to last the test of times. And we're going to notice that a lot today.
Well then, good brother, without further ado, why don't we get into our list? And of course, as tradition here on the Quarantine Files on the Good Brothers, I will start us off. But if you missed any past episode of the Quarantine Files, we've done some really fun stuff. We've done top 30-minute live-action sitcoms. We've done top animated sitcoms. And then we've also done, good brother, it was top Nickelodeon shows, right? So would you say that's probably our most popular episode at this point?
Yeah, exactly. I think so. And we're going to I like to do little themes. So after we finish this 2-part, we're going to get into a new theme for the next 5 episodes.
But on this episode, we'll give you our top 5 Hanna-Barbera classics. And to start us off, I will go with my number 5, and that is Super Friends, good brother. What did you have at number 5?
We have the same number 5, and actually we have the same 5 and 4, which I think we're starting to get the hint that when it comes to certain animation, we grew up on a lot of the same shows and a lot of the same reruns, so you start to notice a pattern. I think where it gets different is our 3 change completely in order. But when it comes to Super Friends, I think it makes the list because it was the original cartoon with our favorite heroes and our favorite action figures finally put on this throwback style. And it doesn't age well, and it's very corny, but I think that's what makes it kind of special now.
How much credit does Robot Chicken deserve for acknowledging its past? Because obviously Adult Swim, part of Cartoon Network, which owns the right of the Warner Brothers and the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, how important and how vital was Robot Chicken and is Robot Chicken to the prominence that has been Super Friends, along with obviously the pop culture importance of superhero movies today?
You know, it has this fun charm to it because it was the original, and there's a charm in its campiness, kind of like the original Batman cartoon. This is Marvel's first form of, like, it's good and it's corny enough to remain good and not get into territories of the bad movies from the 90s that people laugh at and look back and kind of started our new modern trend because how bad they were. this was campy and cheesy at the right time, so it ages in a very classic way.
And at its time, like you said, it was very campy. This wasn't an era of the 60s Batman cartoon. And that was how we perceived superheroes to be at that point. And they didn't mean as much culturally like they do now. And because of all the years, including those shows, that's why there's so much TLC for these characters. Because there's campiness, there's seriousness. There's a lot now that we put into these shows. So I think at number 5, if not for anything else, Super Friends was just a very important show of its time. And it has aged. And it has been graced by time to be given that crown of importance. I don't know. Honestly, me and you were making fun of it. I like Johnny Quest. Maybe I like the new adventures of Johnny Quest because I was a 90s kid, but that's a very important show. So is Space Ghost. There's a lot of shows that the Yogi Bear didn't make this list, but Super Friends, I think over the test of time has become the more important show. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing of how pop culture is so cyclical, but at the same time, this has lasted since the 60s.
No, it's fascinating you brought up Yogi Bear, and that's kind of what I'm talking about is Yogi Bear, Manila Gorilla, a lot of these characters who were so big, and we may not see them in current cartoons or current movies, but everyone knows who Yogi Bear is, and he's in all pop culture, and there's a lot of Deputy Dog and a lot of characters that kind of, again, were bigger than their shows at the time, and that's kind of cool to see on this list. Another thing you're going to notice is a much simpler time in storytelling, a much simpler time in just, this is more fun. This is just fun for the sake of being fun. And I like that kind of cartoon.
So at number 5, the Good Brother and I have Super Friends. At number 4, Good Brother was definitely a show ahead of its time. Also kind of got the pulse of what the nation wanted in it. And at number 4, you and I have the Jetsons.
Yeah, no, the Jetsons is total classic. It's funny, we talk about Futurama all the time. The Jetsons is the original of all sci-fi animation. Like I said, these shows are just fun, and it's a simpler time in America when they're making this. So I think it makes for more simple storytelling, and there's a sense of innocence in that, and a sense of fun where their biggest problem compared to our modern anime. But I love the Jetsons. It's all about the characters, the goofy dog, the goofy dad sidekick with the dog. The stay-at-home mom, the boy, the daughter, and the son. And it all just adds up. And, I mean, in this, we have a robot butler.
And what was really important for the Jetsons was it's the family household again. It was a time in which that was really important. Cartoons weren't just meant for kids. They were meant for the entire family. And the Jetsons, for its time, represented that. This was a much more conservative time when we're looking at these cartoons, obviously. But the Jetsons kind of was the wholesomeness of America with Astro the dog. And, you obviously have Judy and just it was an entire thing. It might as well have been the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family or anything. That's what the Jetsons were. And one of these other shows that we have on our list was a lot like that. But I think that's where the Jetsons really... And it also got the creativity of America. It also, at that time, everything being equal, America had much more innocence in its own brain. It thought by 2020 we wouldn't be dealing with a pandemic, but we would have flying cars. So there's an innocence towards the Jetsons and what they thought the future would be.
No, I agree. Now, here's my question for you. Why, the Jetsons is a staple, and again, pop culture, it's bigger than things, but why is it so low on the list, do you think? Why have we not seen the Jetsons get the same treatment as our top 3?
I think it's for the same reason most things that have to do with the future, but it's not set up far enough, or at least the way it's presented. So we know now, because we're not as innocent and are a little bit more, we have a little bit more edge to us as a society, we don't see the future as the way the people did when they made the Jetsons. So I think it's almost a little tone deaf without it actually trying to be it. I think just naturally it's a show that doesn't really translate to today because we know what the future is. It's the same reason with Blade Runner. It's the same reason why you can't show Blade Runner to a kid that's born in 2015, 2014. It's because they're part of the future. They see what future actually looks like, and it doesn't look like what they portray here. So it's the reason why I think the show that did make our top 3 is, has made more the test of time because of when it is placed. Even though it's exactly the same show, it's really interesting. But I think that's why it's that. Why do you think it hasn't really culturally kept up?
No, I agree completely with you, and I think that's why I feel like you have a bigger dog in this fight when it comes to the Jetsons, because I completely agree with what you just said there, where it doesn't age well in the sense of future's kind of hard to do. I think that's why we always talk about a Back to the Future and a part 4. It's because we kind of already know what the future is going to look like, and it's definitely not that. Futurama does it good because they can do it thousands of years later, but the Jetsons already has a set time that they're supposed to take place in, so I think when we get to my number 3, we're going to realize it's easier to go back and forward.
And speaking of that, good brother, it is time to go for our top 3 each. Now, the first 2 that we had, our number 5 and 4, were the same. As we had at number 5, Super Friends, and at number 4, the Jetsons. But now our 3, our 2, and our 1 are the same, but in different orders. So each of us will go ahead and say our list, and then we'll just have a general conversation about these 3 shows, because I actually think these 3 can be won in their own argument, much more than the first 2 we mentioned. So, and I think universally these are going to be the ones when people vote on them. So I'll go first, and then you finish off. And then once you finish off your list, why don't you go ahead and just start our soliloquy of our 3. But at number 3, I have Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? At number 2, I have the Flintstones. And at number 1, Tom and Jerry. Good brother, what did you have at 3, 2, 1?
So my number 3 was actually the Flintstones. And then I went Tom and Jerry, which was really close. But then I had to get number 1 to Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
So why did you go in that order? What was it about it that made you have to go with your 3, 2, 1 opposed to my 3, 2, 1?
I think when it came down to it, is Tom and Jerry and Scooby-Doo were super close. And first of all, I love the Flintstones. I just think it's a little drier compared to the other 2 and less funny. I appreciate what it's done, and I do like those cheesy, campy live-action movies. I just feel like when you talk about these other 2 shows, they've aged much better, and they're still current. What Tom and Jerry and Scooby-Doo, what it came down to was, I think Tom and Jerry is 15 minutes just funnier, but Scooby-Doo is just something about the characters, something about they've been able to rebuild themselves so many times. It has a very special place. I grew up with a pup named Scooby-Doo, and then the New Adventures of Scooby-Doo, and then the live-action movies we grew up with. And even to this year, they're doing Scooby-Doo the movie, and it looks great at Illumination, and it has the more modern term, but it just shows Scooby-Doo can age with an audience so well. And I think that's the difference between Scooby-Doo and everything else, where Scooby-Doo's always going to be around at this point. Every 10 years, they can just revamp it to the current style, and it sells. And it's very heartfelt. The man and dog relationship is great. Fred, Velma, all of them are just fun show. And Shaggy's one of my favorite characters because he's so loyal. And there's really not a lot of negative to say. And I mean, how many other shows on this list have done as many crossovers?
I love Scooby-Doo. I agree with you. It has an argument to be number 1. The reason I have Tom and Jerry at number 1 for myself is it's a universal show. It's the one show that it doesn't matter the language. It doesn't have a language. It's like Chaplin. It's always timeless. Opposed to, let's say, the Jetsons to the Flintstones. See, the Flintstones, the reason why I think it lasted longer than the Jetsons, A, is because Hollywood, it's easier for them to make a live-action movie of that. But also, it's in the past. We always love dinosaurs. We can always make up things about that. Opposed to the future and the grittiness, it's been done to death. And on top of it, most of society already has its idea of what that looks like. So I think the reason why the Flintstones has made such more of an impact is because of that. And if anything else, it followed the dynamic of the American household better than the Jetsons. It felt much more relatable. There was much more of a community in the Flintstones. It did feel like a much more lived-in world. Tom and Jerry is the strongest cast ever. You're talking about 2 characters that never spoke, that never have had the live action treatment, that really have never needed. You talk about a time where it doesn't matter the computer animation, the hand-drawn animation, they can make that show whenever, however. It could be as violent as they want, it could be as subdued as they want, and it still gets the point. It's the equivalent of Chaplin, it's the equivalent of the Three Stooges. It's timeless, and it will always be that way. And Scooby-Doo is kids' introduction to horror. And that is what makes it perfect. But on top of that, it's a whodunit. You could do a weekly show. That's why it was so successful. And it has a lovable cast. Unlike any of these other shows, it has the most lovable cast. It does have archetypes that people gravitate towards. And I think its biggest strength is it embraces its time. It embraces being a 60s, 70s shows. It embraces being a groovy show. When Scooby-Doo is at its best, it's not when it's trying to be cool hipster 2020, cool hipster 2000s. It's when it's being Scooby-Doo, people out of place, out of time, solving mysteries, and still being as innocent as possible. That's why I think Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island is so beloved, because at the heart of it is introduction to horror, but it also is the characters, even when they go and become these offshoots of themselves, at the core of them, they stood the same kids from the 60s. I love our list, and these are all interchangeable in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think what it comes down to is why Tom and Jerry is not number one, I think, in the final list is, in my opinion, it is Chaplin. It's classic. It's what a cartoon was supposed to be back then. But I think Scooby-Doo is the only one that's really grown with the times, adapted with the times, like you said, but staying completely true to what it is. Scooby-Doo himself is one of the most popular characters in the history of, fake animated animals or characters in general. And I think there's something to be said about that. Like I said, we have a movie coming out this year of that. And I think that's awesome because now you're going to get another new generation carrying around Scooby-Doo's like we did. And I think there's something special about just a group of people, like you said, being introduced to these scary things with the hidden message of, well, there is no monsters. The monsters are actually just everyday people. There's something fun in that.
And culturally speaking, the reason why I think these top three shows are also timeless in its own way, we've used that word a lot because of these are classics, but they're very memeable. They're very gif-able. They're very easy to... Their punchlines are right there for you. Is you is or is you ain't my baby. They're able to hit these notes so fantastic. The Scooby-Doo revealing of the bad guy, it's right there for you. Like this, obviously during the pandemic, people are making fun of us going back to the Stone Age. So these shows are so beloved and they have so much love towards them that, what's the old adage of, flattery? Imitation is just flattery. It's a form of flattery.
Well, look at like they say about the Simpsons and Family Guy. Like they basically took the Flintstones, which we haven't talked about a lot, but they set up the pattern for a family, no matter at what time. A dad, a mom, children, funny animal, neighbors. Okay, let's make a 30-minute sitcom. What can these suburban? Because even though it's Bedrock, it's a suburb. What can these people get into? And again, it carried through The Simpsons, and it carried through Family Guy, and it's going to continue to carry on.
Now, we can disagree and debate, and it's probably the fun part here on the Quarantine Files, a.k.a. the Good Brothers here on the Mercado airwaves with good brother Alex Mercado and myself, Mike Mercado. It's probably some of the fun part a lot of people enjoy is debating and how we make these lists. But I think at the end of the day, we're talking about top-tier Hall of Fame pop culture characters. And I mean, think about it. Most of these characters, like Scooby-Doo only says a few words. Tom and Jerry don't speak, and they are as much a part of pop culture as they have ever been. And that is something to say. And it's not like the writing was great at these times. They didn't take these cartoons seriously, but maybe that was the beauty of it. It's like, it's
That's
not...
the charm of it.
And that's a great point, is it might be the charm of it, that we're not getting this over redundant type of storytelling. And it's just at its purity. It's like, let's have fun. Because here's the big thing too, especially during the Hanna-Barbera 60s and 70s run, these shows didn't last a long time. They went maybe 1, 2, 3 seasons. They went through different studios, and obviously during a lot of different mergers and whatnot, it was really interesting to see that a lot of these shows went only a few seasons.
Well, I think it's fascinating. That's why I picked Scooby number one, because just alone from what we did research from the 50s to about the 90s, Scooby-Doo had almost 8 different shows with Scooby-Doo as the main headliner. And same with the Flintstones had about 6 shows, and they would just change a title here or there, which meant, behind the scenes, they're changing companies, they're merging. But it's hilarious to see that, where it's not just Tom and Jerry, Jerry and his pals, Tom's Happy Hour, which is just the same way of saying, we're going to give you Tom and Jerry, but 10 years different.
And here's the interesting thing, too, is Tom and Jerry and Scooby-Doo specifically have the best type of syndication stuff. The Flintstones you do see a syndication of, but nothing is more friendly than Scooby-Doo and Tom and Jerry reruns. It doesn't matter if they're the most earliest of episodes or the latest of episodes. Cartoon Network was showing Scooby-Doo and Tom and Jerry classics in the middle of their lineup on Saturdays and Sundays and during the weekdays. These shows hold up. I think that's the biggest reason why at 1 and 2 is Tom and Jerry and Scooby-Doo, no matter the list. and the Flintstones are right there, is how easy they are to watch, how easy it is for a network to get behind them, and hell, build theme parks around these characters.
No, I completely agree. And Six Flags is a big part of this because, again, it's that random middle of where you see the Warner Brothers and you do see some Marvel characters from the TV aspect. And you see, the Looney Tunes we're not even going to get into right now. That's going to be, again, its own separate thing like The Simpsons. But then you see these classic characters. Like I said, Yogi Bear has not been in anything in, almost 20 years now? Maybe 15? But everyone knows who he is. Same with the Flintstones. Besides the WWE crossovers we see with them sometimes, and Fruity Pebbles, they're not getting their own movie. They're not getting their own cartoon, but they're still relevant enough to be big characters in pop culture.
Absolutely. So, good brother, it is now time to get our list together. So we already know that at number 5, we both have Super Friends. And at number 4, we have the Jetsons when it comes to our top 5 Hanna-Barbera Classic characters. But at 3, 2, and 1, we had the same ones in different order. At 3, I had Scooby-Doo. Where are you? You had?
I had the Flintstones.
At number 2, I had the Flintstones. You had?
Tom and Jerry.
And at number 1, I had Tom and Jerry. You had?
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
So, why don't we go ahead and make our list. At 5, Super Friends, and at 4, the Jetsons. What will we put at 3? The Flintstones?
It has to be the Flintstones since we both didn't have it at 1. So then it has to be 3.
So, I guess it comes down to 2 and 1, either being Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, and Tom and Jerry. I think we both can make arguments either or, whoever decided we wanted to. So, give me a reason why, without snapping at the other one, give us the reason why at number 1 you have yours.
I think what it comes down to is we're getting a classic, which for its time is great, but we're talking about the show that revolutionized, I believe, in Scooby-Doo when it comes to the characters, and we're talking about the only show that is, to this day, still mainstream relevance and not just a fun memory and not just a fun flashback show. Like, it is still current. It still has a modern audience, which I can argue Tom and Jerry every 5 years kind of loses that core because they haven't been relevant in modern animation.
The reason at number 1 I have Tom and Jerry is it's the easiest show to watch. It's universally the easiest show to watch. Any country can watch Tom and Jerry. You can watch it on mute. And it has a live action movie coming down the pipeline. They do make remakes and they do show classics. And every few years, just like the Ninja Turtles, just like Scooby-Doo, Tom and Jerry is guaranteed a reboot of some sorts. And at the end of the line, you talk about 2 very basic but almost iconic, adorable characters of a simple cat and a simple mouse. And in a universe in which we've had a very huge mouse in Mickey Mouse and all these different iconic characters, 2 simple house animals that, for every other reason, didn't have to succeed, found its place in society, slapstick, it made you laugh, it always had its own little message in there, as goofy as it was. The one drawback to Tom and Jerry, just like any of these shows that we recognize of, is they do have some interesting takes of their time that are very much of their time. But even with that, they're able to transcend it. So at number 1, I have Tom and Jerry. Where are we going to go, good brother? You want to do a coin flip and see how we end up?
No, you don't. You have to do Scooby-Doo. Like, okay, let's take it off the shows itself. The crossover appeal. Like, you can't name a person that was famous between the 60s and now that hasn't been in Scooby-Doo. Every year we get a brand new straight-to-DVD. Tom and Jerry, we don't get a new one every year. We're getting a motion picture from one of the second-best animated movie company in the world that looks fantastic. Scooby-Doo himself is a better mascot than Tom and Jerry. He's the star. I just think when it comes down to it, Scooby-Doo in general deserves to be the number 1.
Scooby-Doo is the only show in their top 2 that was a complete ripoff of another Hanna-Barbera show. Tom and Jerry is an original show. It's the first show that inspired. It's one of the only shows in our top 2 that inspired a whole generation of versus shows. So I think that would be my biggest detriment to Scooby-Doo is it's just a knockoff of another show Hanna-Barbera was making at the same time, opposed to Tom and Jerry being its own classic in a world of Disney and Looney Tunes that then inspired Disney and Looney Tunes.
I mean, like I said, when it comes down to it, I'm not going to budge on it. I think Scooby-Doo is just, it's too much. It's too big in our pop culture. And it's honestly a better show because it does what Tom and Jerry did, but with the voice. And again, it's timeless.
The only show that could be played in any country is Tom and Jerry. But let us know, what do you think? We want an answer. We're not going to budge on either one. So it's time for you. This is the first episode that we really, really need you, the audience of the Quarantine Files, a.k.a. the Good Brothers, to decide. The Good Brother brought a strong argument of why Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Is the number one classic Hanna-Barbera show. I brought you my arguments of why Tom and Jerry is your number one Hanna-Barbera show. The Good Brother, I think we're at a stalemate at this point.
It's funny, though, I just looked it up, that Jerry have also been on Scooby-Doo to catch a ghost cat and a ghost dog and their minions. So even your favorite show has crossed over to Scooby-Doo.
It's an interesting point, and if nothing else, I will give you one more, and then the fans can decide it. Scooby-Doo did work with Batman. So, if not being equal, I have to call a spade a spade. He did have Batman in this episode, and also the Harlem Globetrotters.
That's a win.
So, with that, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of the Quarantine Files. It was so much fun. We got to talk about Hanna-Barbera, very much influential in our life. We are also Six Flags kids. We did not go to Disneyland, Disney World, Universal Studios. Was not really part of the life. Neither was any of these, California Adventures or this, any of those. Busch Gardens, SeaWorld. We were
the films.
We were Six Flags kids. We went to Great America, and that's all we saw. That's what we were introduced to. And then, obviously, Cartoon Network, and growing up, WCIU, Channel 26, The U, was part of Warner Brothers. So we saw a lot of Hanna-Barbera stuff. So it's no doubt why I think we had a lot of fun with this list.
Yeah, no, it's a blast. And like I said, our top three shows are the best. I love the Flintstones. I love Scooby-Doo. Tom and Jerry, like I said, we can literally re-record this and I put Tom and Jerry 1 and Mike take Scooby-Doo and have a great discussion.
And that just goes to show the strength of this show, of how great these shows were. But Good Brother, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So why don't you give a tease? What is the first episode of the Quarantine Files for next week looking like?
So we're going to basically, like I said, I want to do a 5-part series when we kind of do these episodes, knowing that we're going to at least have another 4 weeks minimum. So with this, we're going to finish off with 90s and after. So now you're going to start seeing your Dexters and your modern Cartoon Network as it became, because that's the network. We're kind of putting it there, and your Johnny Bravos and all that fun stuff we're going to kind of get to. And then we're going to go to movies after for the next 5 parts.
It's going to be a lot of fun, Good Brother. But let us know your top 5s. Let us know your list. Let us know what you disagree with. Be polite. If not, I'm going to send Alex after all you guys, because we're just having discussions and talking about the things we love during these very, very troublesome and worrisome times. But if we all stick together and we all do our part, we will get through it. And I really have enjoyed doing this, Good Brother. But that's it, my man. I think that does it for this episode of the Quarantine Files here on the Good Brothers on the Mercado Airwaves Network. Make sure you guys follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. The Good Brother himself is on Twitter at Mercado21 Alex.
Nope, not even going to do it.
And on Instagram at Mercado2121. I could wait here all day. You better shill for me.
Nope.
See, people, if you do not follow him, this is what happens. And, of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. We're on YouTube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Come play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. Download any of our past episodes, including the Quarantine Files series, wherever you get your favorite podcast, at Mercado Airwaves. And while you're at it, like, rate, review, and share us. It really helps grow the brand. You guys have been amazing doing all of that. We have a Patreon. Don't worry about that. Worry about rent. Worry about groceries. Worry about yourself.
No, you can pay me. It's okay.
Pay Alex. Okay, you know what? I take it back. Pay Alex. But Patreon.com.
Homeless and pay me.
At Mercado Airwaves, Patreon.com. For the Good Brother himself, Alex Mercado.
Go back. Watch some cartoons.
I'm the Good Brother, Mike Mercado. We'll see you in the next episode of the Quarantine Files here on the Good Brothers on the Mercado Airwaves
Network.
Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the Good Brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha's on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on youtube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast to like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.